Hey, I'm going to get y'all's attention. Since they were generous enough to usher out quickly, I want to honor that and usher us in quickly. So if those could come in, I know it's already been a long day. Just told Chairman Crow it feels like week 8 or 9 this week. It's been a long couple of days for me. So with that, I'm going to ask the Honorable Casey Carpenter to open us in prayer. Hit your button. No, you can't preach ahead of time. No.
Preach. Everyone bow your head. Dear Heavenly Father, the Father of all, we just ask that you bless our time together. We ask that you help us to make wise decisions for this state. Lord knows that we need you for these things, Father. Help us to be kind to each other even when we disagree, and help us to find solutions to help all Georgians and Georgia businesses and people around the world. Thank you so much. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We are going to hear first from our Acting Commissioner of Labor, Louis DeBrow. Met Louis actually during Republican leadership Georgia, became friends. And I got a piece I want you to read, but I'm not going to tell you about it now because I want you to listen to him about that. But kind of tell us, just tell us what's been going on from a year ago this time, which has been a lot. So, floor is yours. You either one.
Thank you, Chairman Workheiser. I appreciate the invitation to come speak to you and the members of this committee about the progress and the challenges that we faced at the Department of Labor over the last year or so. Obviously, the biggest challenge we faced was the loss of Commissioner Bruce Thompson, who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer last March and passed away this November. He is not easily replaced. He was a visionary with a servant's heart, and we do our best to carry on his vision. But before he left, he put together a team that at Georgia Department of Labor that is customer-oriented, transparent, and we are working diligently towards becoming the most efficient agency in the state. The foundation of the Georgia Department of Labor is its people and its systems. We have an incredible team of dedicated employees who work daily to provide excellent service to the people of Georgia. And though we are currently working within the confines of a very old and labor-intensive, pun partially intended, system, we are in the midst of a complete overhaul and modernization of that system, which will have tremendous benefits for the people of Georgia. This is accomplished with a $4 million TEF grant from the state, and the rest is with federal dollars. Before I get into some of our accomplishments, I can share with you a few top-line numbers that people are usually interested in when it comes to labor. Right now, though it's been ticking up slightly over the last 6 months, Georgia's unemployment rate continues to be better than the national average, currently at 3.4% or 3.7% seasonally adjusted, with 5.4 million Georgians currently in the labor force, thanks to the conservative leadership of Governor Kemp, Lieutenant Governor Jones, Speaker Burns, and the members of this General Assembly. The UI Trust Fund balance is currently at $1.8 billion, which I will note USDOL set solvency at $3.2 billion, so we're working to build that up. Now, to share with you some of the other accomplishments at Georgia Department of Labor over the last year, I'm going to start with our Unemployment Insurance Division, which is our largest division. Last year, we processed a total of 300,000 UI claims. The total number of benefit eligibility reviews performed was nearly 150,000. And we are currently processing UI claims applications within 48 hours from the receipt date. Now, for those of you that have been in the legislature for a while, you will know that this is a drastic improvement. Because 2 years ago, when Commissioner Thompson and our team came in, we were looking at delays between when a customer submitted their claim and when our staff actually processed it, anywhere from 13 to 35 days. So several days a week, we are now processing claims in real time as they come in. So I cannot stress what a drastic improvement that is, which hopefully you have seen in the reduced number of calls to your offices. Total benefits paid for last year were $340 million. Total number of appeals hearings conducted for 2024 were nearly 60,000. And I would also note that we have reduced our appeals backlog by 75% in just from July to December, dropping from 17,000 to 4,200. Some other accomplishments. One of the things we noticed when our team first came in, and Commissioner Thompson charged me with traveling around the state to our career centers and doing top to bottom assessments. And one of the things we realized quickly was that there were a number of our facilities around the state that, frankly, you and I as customers would not want to walk into. They were old, they were dingy. Some of them were moldy, drafty, dusty. They were not pleasant places to come into as a customer, and they certainly weren't pleasant places to come in and work. In the last year and a half, we have put a tremendous amount of effort into upgrading those facilities and our central complex from top to bottom. That includes, in our central complex, bringing our security division in-house. We struggled with the state vendor for a while and finally made that decision to bring them in-house so we could have better control over it and better secure the premises, our staff and employees. We are also in the process of completely revamping our data center uninterruptible power supply, which was a risk. This will allow us to make sure that there are no interruptions regardless of storms or outages or whatever else may happen. Back to the career centers, over the last year, we have invested over $2 million appropriated by this body in our career center statewide. A large majority of those funds have gone to repair parking lots, large potholes, and with eliminating erosion issues, upgrades or replacements to elevators, roofs, and especially HVAC units, which were often 10 to 20 years past life cycle and costing us a lot of money to maintain and repair. In 2024, our facilities team completed 1,465 work orders at these facilities around the state. Of special interest to this body would be our accomplishments of our strike force, which is a small team dedicated by Commissioner Thompson to handle referrals from the executive and legislative branch. In 2024, I should say from May to December of 2024, we handled 451 referrals from the governor's and lieutenant governor's office, 81 referrals from the U.S. House and Senate, 64 from the Georgia Senate, 94 from the House of Representatives, and 28 from other executive branch agencies. In our career center operations, we have worked to make bold, transformative upgrades, enhancing service delivery, revitalizing facilities, and modernizing technology to ensure that every Georgian gets the care and support they deserve. Our statewide operations team is laser focused on delivering a superior experience for everyone that enters our doors, and we have made significant investments in ongoing training and competency assessments to ensure that we continue to meet those high standards. We are also currently in the midst of a heavy shift of IT operations away from on-premise servers to cloud-based systems. This is going to be an enormous benefit for the state and for our customers, as this will provide significant improvements in data security, threat detection and response, allow us to do real-time monitoring, drastic improvements in regulatory compliance, redundancy, and operational efficiencies. Other broader agency-wide accomplishments, we reduced the number of audit findings. And on a related note, for those of you that will be voting on budgets in the coming weeks, we have requested in our wish list funding for 2 audit compliance officers so that we can stay ahead of the curve there. We also received the Model Agency Award from DOAS for excellence in human resources. Last year, we also answered 391,069 phone calls from our customers. This past year, we also eliminated 23 IT contractors that were working on programs that were no longer kind of relevant as we move into the UI modernization project. They were not operations critical projects, and so we have saved the state about $3.1 million annually by making those cuts. Although, again, I will note that with the UI modernization project, when that is implemented, we will need to get some of the funding back for IT services in other areas. We also consolidated 6 of our Career Center locations that had very low foot traffic. That gives the state an annual savings of $780,000. Leadership also matters. This was a big initiative of Commissioner Thompson. Coming in, he wanted to make sure that we were not only developing our existing leaders, but developing the next generation of leaders. So in summer 2024, we brought our GDOL Career Center managers together for an intensive 3-day training session, making sure that we put the right people in the right place at the right time to ensure every Georgian receives world-class customer service. We also believe that partnership drives opportunities. In 2024, GDOL forged stronger partnerships statewide, working with the Governor's Office, Lieutenant Governor's Office, General Assembly, businesses, community and workforce leaders, and schools to drive opportunity and success for all Georgians and to ensure that we continue to be the best place to work, live, and raise a family. Some of the projects and programs that we are currently working on. The biggest and most impactful is the UI modernization project, which we have dubbed UI Inspire. We're about 13, 14 months into this project, and this is going to impact every aspect of our operations and customer service. When completed, it will improve our customer service and delivery. It will improve operational efficiency and accuracy. It will provide a current technology that provides better security and fraud prevention in a cloud-based system. It will provide a streamlined, intuitive user interface and workflow which will allow for better customer self-service, which in turn allows GDOL staff to focus on non-standard cases and adjudication. This in turn will drastically reduce the number of phone calls and complaints we get, because a large number of the calls and complaints we get are, what's the status of my claim? When am I going to get paid? As we streamline all these processes and move things along quicker, there will be less need, obviously, for customers to call with those questions. It will also provide for more granular reporting for operational and regulatory accountability, and give us improved timeliness and quality of our decisions. Another big initiative of the commissioners was the Walking the Last Mile program. So for those that may have heard him on the campaign trail or spoke when he was here 2 years ago, you recall his personal story. He had a challenging upbringing. I think it's one of the reasons why he and I clicked so well early on. We both had difficult childhoods, but we both had a desire to help others. And one of the areas this manifest was Commissioner Thompson had a half-brother who was in and out of the correction system. And in and out for years. He'd get out, get arrested a few months later, go right back in. And when he got back out, he just never felt like he belonged in society. And unfortunately, at one point, he took his own life because he felt like he couldn't manage. And so this Walking the Last Mile to Reentry program was very dear to the commissioner's heart. And so when we first got at GDOL in January of 23, he began laying the outlines of this program with really not much of a budget, but just a big desire. And we are now working with the Department of Corrections. They identify candidates for us of incarcerated individuals who will be coming out within the next 9 months to a year. And then we assign them a case manager. We go in and we do personality profile assessments. We teach them the love languages. We teach them soft skills. One of the things I think you and I take for granted is how we communicate with others. If you are someone who has been incarcerated for the last 7 to 10 years and you're in a prison setting where eye contact is considered a sign of aggression, you learn very quickly not to make eye contact with others. Now, if you're in an interview and you're sitting on the other side of the desk with the person interviewing you, and you refuse to make eye contact, then the person interviewing you is going to take that as a sign of dishonesty. So we teach them how other people are perceiving them and how to communicate better. And then we connect them with churches and civic groups and rehabilitation centers and a variety of support groups. And finally, we have over 1,000 businesses around the state that have committed that as individuals graduate from these programs, the moment they walk out the prison door, they have already got a job. At this point, we have graduated 3 classes, successfully placing nearly every candidate that graduated, and our 4th class started last month. It went well enough that we got a federal grant to expand the program and have hired additional case managers. One thing I would like to note is that all of these significant improvements and the progress that we have made over the last year and a half have come despite roughly a 25% decrease in total headcount. We have gone from 960 employees in January 2023 to roughly 750 employees today. So, though we have made drastic improvements in our processes and efficiencies, we are still working within the confines of a very archaic system that is very labor-intensive, that's very unwieldy, and so any efficiency gains over the next 18 months are going to be on the margins. Once the new UI system rolls out, then we will be able to shift some of the work from that labor-intensive work to more of the adjudication and assessment, which is going to be a big benefit for us. I would also note that while right now we are processing claims most days the same day or within 24 hours of submission, post-COVID, the number of claims has gone up. So, for example, pre-COVID, when unemployment rate hit 4%, we were seeing approximately 25,000 new UI claims per month. Post-COVID, or I should say pre-COVID, we saw 25,000 per month at 4%. Post-COVID, we're now seeing workers file more unemployment claims. And so our data trends since 2020 project that an unemployment rate of 4% will result in roughly 35,000 claims a month. So that's not going to be, we're not going to be able to absorb that with existing staff. And so that's just to make note that we're running pretty smoothly right now and keeping our fingers crossed that the unemployment rate stays low until our new system rolls out. As far as our vision for the future, in 2025, our focus is on keeping our UI modernization project on track, implementing the state's new Workday system for HR and finance functions, and continuing training and staff development to build up the next generation of leaders at Georgia Department of Labor. We have a very stratified leadership right now. We've got a lot of people that have been there for 15, 20, 25 years. In fact, we have one gentleman named Jesse who is about to celebrate his 50th year with the Georgia Department of Labor. I believe he came with the building. But also, as we continue to analyze and make process improvements, we are dropping a department bill this week sponsored by Senator Sean Still with a companion bill in the House, which will allow us to electronically send out determinations and transmit information to customers regarding appeals, which we are surprisingly not currently able to do. And in closing, I would just like to take a moment to tell you how very, very proud I am of our Georgia Department of Labor team. We've made tremendous progress over the last 2 years and continue to make progress even as we make significant improvements to our systems, process, and technology, which had gone unaddressed for far too long. We have an amazing staff. I cannot stress that enough. I know during the pandemic, there was not a lot of love for the Department of Labor. The feedback that we got was people thought that the Department of Labor didn't care, that they were just kind of coming in, clocking out, when the reality is that the struggles that we saw were more limitations of the system. We saw a more than 1,000% increase in the number of daily unemployment claims filed. And again, with an UI system that was built in 1982, there was simply no way to handle it. But to kind of share with you the commitment that our team has, our UI director, Denise Beckwith, worked 18 months straight during the pandemic. And I mean without a single day off, Christmas, New Year's, Easter, her birthday, Saturday, Sunday, because she knew that there were Georgians desperate for the benefits that they needed and were not getting. We have 2 managers in the last year that have battled cancer, that have continued to work because, as one of them told me, I can't do anything about my situation other than take my treatment, but I can feel better knowing that I'm helping others. After Hurricane Helene, we had an advanced specialist in Dublin who used her personal generator to power her laptop, even though she had no power or water at her house, so that she could process claims even before her house got power back. We had another manager in South Georgia that continued coming to work for 3 weeks despite having no power or water at her house. Now, these are just a few of the many, many stories that I could tell you about the staff of the Department of Labor, and I want you to know that as citizens of Georgia, as legislators, as taxpayers, you can be proud of this agency. I want to thank you again for this opportunity to share this update with you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I'm going to allow a couple. You said one thing, leadership matters, and it does. And I want to just thank you, y'all. Both of you and Bruce stepped in at the worst of times and continued on. And again, Vanessa, if you'll remind me more, I'm going to send a link to the treatise you wrote.
Which one?
At his passing, it was a good story of y'all's whole story. It was really good.
Yes, thank you.
But I don't want people distracted now, so let's take them right down the road. Whip Park. Oh, 16. Oh, you're hiding behind McLean. You know, running backs used to do that.
It's me. Thank you. It's
Representative Schofield.
Right,
Is that you?
Yes, it's me.
Okay, go ahead.
You
I know, I got all 3 of y'all.
17.
Ladies first.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for being here, Louis. I appreciate all the work you and the team has done. I have 2 quick questions, and thank you, Mr. Chair. The first one is about the advisory council that was established, General Assembly established that I believe it was before the pandemic, and it met for a minute and then it has not come back. What is the status on this advisory council? I'd like to know the members.
Yeah, it is still dormant at this time, but we have discussed recently bringing that back to life. That was something that Commissioner Thompson was enthusiastic about doing, but we had a few other bigger fish to fry, so to speak, coming out of the gate, again, because we had a lot of issues just with the archaic nature of our system and getting some of those fires put out.
Is there a timeline?
No, ma'am. At this point, obviously, I am the acting or interim, so I think that would probably depend on when Governor Kemp makes an appointment.
All right. And the last question, is just how many career centers are open and how many did actually close?
So we started off 2 years ago with 39. We now have 34. And when we say we say consolidated rather than closed because we didn't lose staff. The career centers that we consolidated or closed down the physical footprint. We made sure we did a lot of research and looked at our internal data because we didn't want to negatively impact our customers, obviously. But give you, for example, we shut down the career center in Lafayette. which they were averaging about, if I remember correctly, they were averaging about 5 in-person customers a day. And the Dalton Career Center, or Rome Career Center, I'm sorry, is about 35 minutes from there. Same thing with Toccoa. Habersham was folded into Toccoa. They're less than 30 minutes apart. And so we did take an assessment of that footprint and how it would impact the customers.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Representative McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to say thank you very much, Interim Commissioner, because I did love your video. I mean, when that had good taste, and it helped a lot of my citizens. I guess my question is, I know that you said that you combined and you didn't close, you just combined some of the facilities. I guess my question more so deal on funding. So, are there any funding issues that I know that you said that you were hoping for more money, or I mean, I'm just trying to make sure that you get what you need for my constituents can get what they need.
Yes, sir. Well, I mean, I think that every agency in the state will tell you that they need more money. I can only tell you kind of our current posture. Again, I want to reiterate kind of what I talked to about our staffing levels. January 2023, we were at 960. We're down to roughly 750 now. We are running pretty lean. The concern that I noted earlier, for example, if we see any kind of significant uptick in the unemployment rate, then we're going to see a corresponding uptick in the number of claims filed. And while we are effectively handling the current number of claims, if we see a significant increase, we just simply don't have the staff to be able to absorb that and still process those claims timely. So we would need to staff up. Part of our problem is that most of our budget comes from the federal grants, and we get our allocation for this year was based on how many claims were processed last year. And so we're always kind of running behind, because by the time unemployment rate ticks up, then then you need to staff up. Well, you got to have the money first to staff up, and then you got to train them. And unemployment is a surprisingly complex system, and it's not something where it's not like hiring a temp to run a cash register where you can teach them in a couple hours how to do the basics. The UI process is complex, and we are constantly getting updates from USDOL that we have to make changes, and so it just takes a while to get new staff really comfortable.
Mr. Chairman, so I guess you are having some funding issues then.
We could certainly use more funding. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Holly, and I believe this is your last one.
I was able to hear the earlier part of your presentation, but thank you for at least assisting Commissioner Thompson with it was very necessary work, and I know sometimes it was probably thankless. I was actually just concerned about kind of maybe the big elephant in the room, the big fiscal elephant. That $108 million that was kind of found and moved from an interest-bearing account to one that wasn't, and put back in. I know that's not your administration.
Correct.
And certainly when I used to write criminal arrest warrants. That sounds like secreting property or conversion, something crazy. And I know that nothing ever came of it. Has your agency actually established any mechanisms so that something of that nature could happen in the future? I'm curious, because I know it would be great if you had the money in there, but it's something else to be able to find that money existed all along, but through some secretive methods. Yeah,
the safeguards were in place. They just weren't adhered to. Like I said, when we first got in there, and the commissioner was handed a document that he was supposed to sign, verifying that all the funds had been transmitted properly, and As he told me, he said something just didn't feel right about it. So I started digging, and the more I dug, the more concerned I got. Honestly, I'm neither an accountant nor an attorney, so I don't feel comfortable getting too deep in the weeds on this. But I will say that we have internally, that is being constantly monitored, and we've got one of the most well-respected CFOs in the state leading our finance department, and she's got things running smoothly. So,
Okay. Well, I want to appreciate, again, thank you for everything you've done, and we've talked a little bit on and off since then, and, it's a role that you well, it looks like you were ready for it, but anyway, I just thank you from this committee, because we did hear all the stuff during COVID, and you've done a great job, and just know that you're well thanked for that. We appreciate it. And he's always been available if y'all need to get to him for any reason. So thank you for coming.
thank you, Commissioner, or Chairman.
Okay, come on up, Matt. This is a hearing only. I think the author and those supporting the bills have tried to talk to most of the members of this committee. Been concerned from both sides, and I will say the author has been extremely accommodating on hearing from folks that had concerns, and actually wanted to slow the process down himself. But we thought that let's get the hearing out there. It is a hearing only. Let's address some of those concerns, and then let's just see where it goes from there. So the table, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Workheiser, members of the committee. We are working under LC 280658S, a substitute, which should be in front of you. And this is HB 82, the Georgia Guest Worker Program. We're picking up where we left off last term. This was, I think, the last bill I presented last term. We got the idea late and filed it, but wanted to go ahead and get some input on it. So I appreciate the input that was given. In 2024, we tried to work as much of that into this bill as possible, and the substitute also worked some good input that we got since it was filed in 2025. I'm joined here by Les Schneider, a labor law lawyer here in Atlanta who is knowledgeable on this subject, and also for Georgia state government trivia, he worked with Chairman Tom Rice for 4 years to get the birthday car tag tax changed over to the current system, so you don't get a big car tag tax bill on your birthday. So they did the Lord's work on that. But this bill, if you're a business in Georgia and you're getting your workforce needs met with people from Georgia, this bill isn't for you. If you've moved from Georgia and you're finding your workforce needs met around America, this bill isn't for you. If you're an employer and you're getting your needs met with the status quo of federal immigration, with dealing with them on the various guest worker programs, and you're getting your needs met and you find that system to be satisfying and easy to use, then this bill isn't for you. But if you've got some dissatisfaction with the status quo at the federal level with immigration and you have unmet workforce needs, House Bill 82 is the answer to that problem. We believe there are some unmet workforce needs and that there is a demand for legal, merit-based, temporary guest workers here in Georgia after exhausting Georgians, Americans, and the status quo at the federal level of dealing with the federal bureaucracy as one of people across the country. What this bill does is it sets up a presence in Georgia state government for small businesses to contact the state government and say, I have unmet workforce needs after exhausting everything with, state and national workforce as well as federal immigration authorities. And state of Georgia, I'd like for you to contact the federal immigration authorities and say, we need more talented guest workers, legal guest workers here in Georgia in this particular type of business. And it gives the state the opportunity to verify that and take a look at the statistics and the market and the business and make sure that's true. It puts a lot of safeguards in and makes sure these are legal, verified folks who've been cleared by the federal authorities who are eligible to participate. It even puts some additional restrictions on it. You can't have broken the law, immigration or criminal law in the past to be eligible. as an employee under this program. Also with the employers, you have to have a clean record also, and there are some consequences in this bill for employers who abuse this program, and then you're excluded if you've broken the law previously. So that's a little bit of an overview. Getting more into the specifics, this version of the bill allows the governor to pick where in state government it's the best place to handle it, and then subjects the program to the appropriations process. That way it's funded and it's at the right place. It's my understanding that technical colleges have gotten more involved in workforce in recent years rather than the Department of Labor, and it allows the governor to choose whether technical colleges, Department of Labor, or somewhere else in state government is the right place to put it, and it gives the General Assembly the appropriations authority to pick the right number and funding. This bill would only apply if the businesses show they have a demonstrated need, and the Department of Labor, working with the federal government, gathers a lot of labor statistics. So there are ways to verify if that's the case, that there are shortages in particular areas, and the state government could verify that as well. The numbers are definitely controlled by the state under this program, and the sectors of employment and the criteria is determined by statute and has a lot of transparency and oversight and checks and balances. The fines, $5,000 per violation for the employer, $10,000 for the workers with criminal penalties. It establishes the basis for regulatory authority. On the last page of the bill, you could see the Attorney General has to verify that state and federal law are followed, and it has a 90-day period for that to come into effect, and also the Attorney General would verify that the funding is there pursuant to the General Assembly. So what this bill does not do is it doesn't give the state of Georgia or employers or employees the ability to come in the country. That is still a federal immigration decision to make. So the state would basically just be a conduit to make sure that our local employers in Georgia have priority over available people who want to come to America and work legally under a guest worker program. But the state of Georgia is not issuing any sort of visas or immigration credentials. That's something that the federal government would retain. But what it would do is it would set an infrastructure in Georgia law to have an orderly guest worker, legal, merit-based immigration process. What will that do? It will dry up the market for illegal immigration for employers or employees who are on the black market and who have under-the-table employment practices. It would do that by fulfilling unmet workforce needs with legal, merit-based immigration that is has multiple checks and balances. It encourages lawful conduct and abiding the law. It got people in my area very excited because you have a lot of legal immigrants and people familiar with immigration who wait years in line, and every process that is orderly and workable and you can understand and use, people who have lived the American dream and immigrated here legally, they appreciate that. And they have, cousins and relatives and friends back in, Korea and India and places who would love to come work here in Georgia if they're able to. And we got kind of a chaotic immigration system now, which hopefully will get better over time. But what this will do is it will let Georgia be a leader in pursuing a better immigration system nationally. It would take advantage of federalism so that Georgia would point the way on how to do a good system. And it would allow state government to be an advocate for our small businesses who have unmet workforce needs and for employees who want to come here in Georgia and work temporarily and give a good background for more long-term workforce needs. So, the Statue of Liberty, you think of Ellis Island, back in history in America, you had a very orderly immigration process where there was paperwork and paper trail that still exists today. This would kind of get to be a process that is, legal, merit-based, temporary, very orderly, both with a layer of state as well as federal oversight to let people come live the American dream here in Georgia, and so that workforce needs are met. So that is an overview of the bill. I know Les Schneider is glad to talk in depth also from the legal side, and we could either do that in response to Q&A or if the committee would like to hear from him. But I appreciate you considering this bill. It's something that could make Georgia a leader and solve our unmet workforce needs the right way.
Okay, we do have a couple questions. I got one, because I know Claxon Poultry and the Chicken Federation had talked to me about this last year. They're wanting it, but I'm a little confused of why we need this so like Claxon Poultry has a way of bringing in folks, and they do, and they're legal. So how is this different from what that already exists? Because they're already bringing in folks.
They are, but a lot of those agribusinesses and other companies that use temporary guest worker programs, it's aggravating and it's unpredictable, and you have annual lotteries. Federal immigration too is in fits and starts. This would create a permanent Georgia seat at the table where they're saying to the federal authorities, look, here are some workforce needs in Georgia that need to be met. So It basically lets the state of Georgia be an advocate for our workforce needs so that Claxon Poultry or a business here in Georgia that has a workforce need is not in this chaotic national system at the whim of some lottery or unpredictable system that's aggravating and often unreliable.
Okay. Chairman Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to my friend, I have a few questions, as I think you know. First of all, to the chairman's question, so we do have federal. We have the H-1A, H-1B. I used an H-1A program the other day planting longleaf pine on my farm, and it worked fabulously and worked very well. And my forester explained that it cost him a little more to do it right, but it's done right that way. And I probably paid a little more. But there is a process. We have too many employers that don't want to follow the process. So let me just begin by saying that. I think that's a very good question. We have a lot of employers that don't want to follow that process because either they have to provide housing, or they have to pay a certain wage, or they have to pay to move them back and forth. So I just want to begin by saying that. So my friend, we are friends, and I've talked to you about this. So you know that 3% of the country now are illegal. We have anywhere. On the low end, they say 15 million. On the high end, we say 21 million people who are illegally in the country today. We have a new president that is dealing with this issue. He's dealing with it strongly, as he should, and we thank him for that, because that's what the American people want him to do. So at a time like this, hopefully we're going to get reforms to those same visa programs to make sure we can bring people here to work and then return to their country of origin. I think hopefully, as he does the reforms that he's doing, we're going to see improvements to some of those programs. But to be clear, right now what you're talking about is a state program to bring more people into the country, when again you have right at 450,000 illegals in the state of Georgia today. You do know that. 450,000 people in the state of Georgia today are illegally in the country. So no matter how you slice it, you're talking about bringing more people into the country who are non-citizens. Now, you have requirements in here. You speak to a felony for people who don't return home. Well, how do you think those folks that are in the country illegally today got here? They came on programs and they refused to go home. And do you really believe somebody is going to track them down, and you believe that DAs in all these communities are going to prosecute those people? Those are my questions, just a few of them. I'll leave it with that. I share a lot of your aggravation with illegal immigration, and the legal immigrants in my area do too. This is a solution to that. The employers are obligated to get the employees here and get them home. To make sure they're not going to the hospital and having uncompensated medical care, make sure that that they're following the law, and they're going to get terminated from the program. They're not going to be able to use it again
the small businesses are if they violate that. And there are strict penalties in that. So those are a few of the checks and balances. But I would say this, hope in Washington is not a good long-term strategy. It's up and down. Georgia has gotten where it is by meeting our workforce needs, education, good business climate, taxation, workforce development. And this is something that will remove any temptation for anybody to do illegal immigration, because you've got a robust, legal, merit-based, temporary, supervised guest worker program. So I agree with you. We need to get rid of illegal immigration. This bill is part of a solution for that. And if employers have a more workable, legal, merit-based guest worker program, they're less likely to engage in any sort of temptation to do illegal immigration. And the example you used of somebody using the federal system with a guest worker program, and it costs better, but it worked, that's a good example of what we need more of, and this bill would help facilitate that rather than having black market illegal labor practices. And Mr. Schneider, that might be a good point if I could defer to him to elaborate a little bit in more depth.
No, I want to thank the committee, because obviously I've spoken to every one of you individually on this issue, and this is something that maybe I foolishly do around here, which is do something pro bono and, don't get paid by a client, but think there's a good idea here. I want to address Representative Petrie's points, because he was very kind to spend time with me and really be very open about what his concerns are, but he fully was open about the fact that he utilized this type of program. And what I would say on that issue is, first, that this bill does not become effective until the federal law is adjusted to allow the state of Georgia, as opposed to the United States, to decide how many guest workers we really should have. That is a very key part. The second key part is it's subject to whatever appropriation has to be done in this state to do this. But what happens if the federal law is we're doing everything on the federal level except one thing? We're going to do what Republican Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin and Representative Ken Buck of the U.S. House, what they wanted was to simply allow the state and not the federal government to decide how many guest workers should exist in this state. So to Representative Petrie's point, he worked with one contractor and had temporary workers under what or it was H-2A, H-2B, whatever it was. But there may be 7 or 8 other companies that didn't get any workers because the quota was filled on the federal government level. How about we decide how many guest workers should exist in this state by palpable studies that show not just tree planters, but nurses in rural Georgia, doctors in rural Georgia, IT people, people who can fill jobs in this state that we bona fide have a labor shortage for. And maybe those people come over to this country and teach some of the people who live here how to do that work. I don't think we should be so parochial and so provincial as to think that we can't learn from other people coming into this state, but allow people to come into this state the right way. Every one of the criticisms that Representative Petrie has articulated, I concur with. But I also know that if you give people a path to do something lawfully, most people take the lawful path. And I'm as sick of having chaos in search of frenzy on the immigration question in this country, and it's sad because people basically get used as inventory. But that U.S. Senator and that U.S. Rep dropped that bill in, and they were shocked that they had so much bipartisan support. And at the end of the day, the existing president and a guy by the name of Elon Musk, who I'd never met, but I read the long biography. Every one of them has said, we have issues on immigration, all the ones that Representative Peachtree talked about. But they said they want the H-2A, they want the H-2B, they want the H-1A. Why? Because they use it, and it's successful. But at the end of the day, this bill doesn't change that. This bill does one thing. The state of Georgia, instead of the United States of America, decides how many guest workers should come to this state. And if you read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, so many other papers, there's one editorial after the other about the existing way we decide on the numbers is ridiculous. It's a lottery. That's not the way it should be done. It should be done by analysis of what our needs are. And at the end of the day, I think that this bill is nothing more than a message. It's a message from the state government to the federal government about, you give us the input that we decide the number of guest workers that should come to this state, and we're going to study it.
All right, we've got several questions. Just a warning to both sides. Immigration is can be a very passionate subject. Let's address the bill, not past, future administrations, whatever. Let's talk about the bill, okay? If y'all could do me that one favor, okay? Thank Chairman Bonner.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing the bill. So as I understood my initial kind of reading and the presentation of it, and then based on what I'm hearing now, this is not necessarily creating two separate lines of work in terms of what the federal program is doing and then creating a new state program. My understanding of it initially was that it was a bit of a, almost call it a trigger bill, that if the federal government changed policy to allow the state more input into the guest worker program, then the provisions of this bill would be in effect. Is that okay? And
Well, also, it would make us ready if the federal government does devolve more to the state level, but also until that day happens, it gives the state the ability to say to the feds, hey, we need some more legal guest worker programs in these areas.
okay, well, so then to be clear, it's not a trigger bill in terms of there are provisions of this bill that would go into effect regardless of a change in federal policy, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right, so that's certainly one thing, and so that is different than my initial understanding of the bill, because I don't really see any language that would cause a trigger per se. The other concern that I have is, and I believe the intent is very noble, and I certainly agree with the intent. Part of my challenge is I see a lot of. It seems as though once the legislative branch passes this bill, we have effectively given up any authority in this regard. Based on the bill, we're given a great deal of authority to the executive branch in terms of the studies, in terms of picking which department it administers it to, a lot of things that I think we may want to take a look at to give the legislature some more input. I mean, we certainly, it's no mark against any executive, but I do think that the legislature that represents so many of the people of Georgia directly needs to have some input as to the studies, what department it goes to, amounts of workers, and that kind of thing. So I would hope, and I know this is hearing only, but if you're taking input, that would certainly be something from me to look at to give the legislature some authority as this bill moves forward.
Glad to work with you on that.
Yep, and I saw him making notes, and he's been very good about, in fact, this is the second, if not third, iteration, because you have been taking input. All right,
I just
don't
want to
talk
say
too
one
long,
thing.
we got questions.
Yeah, I just
And we
wanna
got people signed up.
Yeah, I just want to Representative Bonner, if in fact the federal law does not change, then there would not be anything that we could do other than we send the message that we would like to make the determination of how many workers. So there wouldn't be anything going forward. And then there has to be funds allocated by the legislature to make sure, to be able for the fund for this to be activated. So to your point, the input as to which agency and all that other stuff would be coming back. But if you don't allocate any money, there is nothing that's going to occur.
And I appreciate that response. I mean, again, I would just reiterate that simply providing money is not all of the input that I would like the legislature to have. So,
Right, but if you hold back the money and make sure there's something else you want to give on input, then it can occur.
Okay, Representative McLean, then Carpenter, then Barton. Okay,
Thank you,
Representative
Mr.
McLean.
Chairman. I guess I have just a few. I mean, I guess I'll go with Chairman Barn. And my only concern is that on line 22, I guess the reason 21, I guess start with 21. My problem when I asked the Department of Labor about their funding issues, that was a reason, I shouldn't say a reason, but the Department of Labor, it just seemed like they're not part of what we're, where you are, what we're doing. I don't know. I mean, why was not the Department of Labor part of or being discussed?
They were in the first two drafts of the bill. I got educated that a large amount of workforce effort of state government moved to the technical colleges in recent years. The Department of Labor has run some numbers on potential administration of the program. However, there hasn't been an analysis of what can we utilize the federal personnel and statistics and data with versus having to do on our own in Georgia. And so I think having the governor select the agency that's currently doing workforce, whether that's Department of Labor, technical colleges, or something else, and then have the safeguards that Chairman Bonner mentioned about legislative input as well as the funding. I think that's the way to go. I'm glad to talk further with Department of Labor, but I think having the executive branch pick the right place so that we can take advantage of the personnel and bandwidth we already have is probably the best way to go.
Mr. Chairman, I guess the last thing I have, I would just want to talk, I guess, the potential for workers' exploitation. I mean, line 65 through 113, you had the bill established wage, housing, as well as insurance requirements. But it said nothing about poor working conditions or long hours or job insecurity. So, I mean, those are just some things that as a labor person you need to, there's a reason that you have an 8-hour work day, 5-day work day, work week, things of that nature. So
That's right. And
I didn't see that in the legislation.
I would respond to that. I mean, federal law is all throughout there, and there are a ton of federal employment laws. Page 5 of the bill talks about the rate, line 97, the wage rate. So the pay, the amount of the pay, the health insurance, the housing, the transportation, to America and back home. Things like that are some safeguards in addition to the fact that Fair Labor Standards Act is referenced on line 103 and many other federal and state law. The Attorney General is mentioned in the bill, and I think having the executive branch, the Department of Law at the state level, in addition to all these federal laws.
So working conditions and all of that was, okay. I just wondered. I mean, I didn't see it, so I just. I didn't.
And one problem with illegal immigration over time in America and around the world is that takes wages down. What this is doing is it'll have wages high and have standards high. If you have unmet workforce needs after talking to Georgians, Americans, and you go out there and do a guest worker program, you're doing higher standards rather than illegal immigration, which is lower standards. You're taking the standards higher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Carpenter.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for bringing the bill. Obviously, I see this as an opportunity. You've got manufacturers, you've got chicken companies, et cetera, that need workers. I I understand everybody's concern. I would love to hear some information about how many of these people that come on H-2B, et cetera, all the different programs. What is the number that leave the country? Because it's been my understanding that most of the ag guys that come in leave and come back next year, and it becomes a 20-year program for people. And I think it's unfair to allow this to occur in agriculture, allow this to occur in tourism, but yet we can't allow this to occur in manufacturing, et cetera, because there's needs, no question about it, that the workforce is aging. You don't think that we're going to need truck drivers moving forward? You don't think we're going to need a lot of different people? And unfortunately, we're not having a lot of children in America. That workforce pipeline is not continuing to grow. Unless AI can save us from it, we're going to have major problems. And, you know, the old saying is, don't bite the hand that feeds you. My grandma said that for years as she slapped me in the face. No, I'm just kidding. And that's the reality, is we have a disconnect, right? We all want immigration solved, but nobody wants to go work in the chicken plant. So how do you solve, without a program like you're suggesting, how do you solve the issue? Because guess what? People are going through Chick-fil-A every day. Everybody in this room is hitting Chick-fil-A every day. We've got to have a solution. And I applaud you for bringing it. I applaud you for looking for a solution, because everybody else is pointing at problems. And I'm a man that likes to find solutions, so I look forward to following this legislation.
And what, again, House Bill 82 says the state of Georgia will be a leader in legal merit-based immigration and temporary legal guest workers by pointing out the unmet workforce needs. And the federal law, it's unreliable, it's narrow, it's not pro-workforce and pro-small business. Georgia will take the lead here in being an advocate and saying, we have unmet workforce needs based on data in these areas. We need some more legal, talented, temporary guest workers in these areas. So that's the idea behind this bill. And that can happen currently under this bill. And definitely if the federal government makes a move to send things back to the states, Georgia will be ready and will be a leader as well.
Okay, Wood Park, and then we're going to move to some of our speakers who will be very brief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have a few questions, if that's okay. But first, wanted to say, Representative Reeves, thank you for bringing the bill. I think especially in this climate, I think you're trying to solve a problem, especially where we see a lack of really any progress at the federal level, certainly on this issue. Especially given the contributions that immigrants and even undocumented immigrants make to the state of Georgia, where I think in 2022 they contributed about $1 billion in state and local taxes to the state. Rates of crime are lower within the undocumented population. And of course, we also saw in 2012 with HB 87 when we restricted, work access from immigrant communities to the state, particularly with respect to the agricultural industry, we lost about $140 million. And so one, I think just recognizing the importance of dealing with this issue, I think is important. Now, at the same time, given the history of guest worker programs in the United States of America and in the South, I would like to see, especially if this moves forward, some tightening of the language. I think I'm frankly impressed in terms of the comprehensive nature in which you try and address so many aspects from housing and healthcare. But I did recognize a few instances in which you have your conditional language if required or provided for in federal law. That aside, I think if there's a win-win for the state of Georgia, for employers here, for folks who want to come and work and make a good living for their families, I think we should always be open to exploring those sorts of solutions. Certainly, as well, if there's an opportunity to find common ground. Again, wanting to protect both employers and employees, which I think in this committee we've always done a good job of trying to find that right balance. Again, if this bill is moving forward, hopefully, we can continue the work of potentially perfecting the bill.
And I welcome that tightening of the language and good ideas on this. And what I tried to do, one of the gripes about illegal immigration is you got, uncompensated patients at hospitals and various government services. What this bill will do is it will say there's not going to be a single dollar of burden on state and local government and hospitals and schools and all that. It's all paid for under this. So I'm glad to continue to work to make sure that we got high standards on that.
Thank you, Representative Reese. I did have two specific questions. One, have you talked to the governor's office in terms of kind of where this could potentially be placed? And then the second question, is it not true that in 2012, the Georgia State Senate passed a resolution urging Congress to allow states to administer their own H-2A guest worker programs?
I wonder where the federal government filed that resolution. I could guess where they filed it. Might have had a circular size file, but the last week or two was when we made this sub that designated the governor as the head of the executive branch. I will follow up with them and explore that. But I do know that the transition over to the technical colleges on workforce, that probably would give a good clue, but no, I have not gone into that. I wanted to do our work here in the House and get a good bill and move it forward as far as we can, but I certainly will reach out to them based on the depth of the questioning. I think this is a serious improvement that can be made, and I think it's time to start having conversations like that.
Thank you.
I think also the reason not only did we, as you saw, and there isn't a bill where it mentioned the Georgia Department of Labor, but then we said something decided by the governor, goes almost to Representative Dewey McClain's point that it could very well be that this may be split among more than one agency. There may be agencies that do a very good job of labor shortages, doing those studies. That may not be the strong suit of the Georgia Department of Labor, but the actual execution of the program and the number of workers, et cetera, may be. So that's why it was left open. But to Representative Bonner's point, again, we have to figure out, A, it only can become effective upon funding and federal approval. But secondly, and most importantly, you want to make sure that you engage the proper state agencies to do the program correctly. So it may be more than one agency.
Okay, let's hear from some of our folks who've been patiently sitting. And we've got two sign-in sheets. I'm going to go back and forth because I don't know which one's out there first. All I ask is, again, no political, we can get that from Fox and CNN. Address the bill, what you like or don't like about it. We'll start with Brett Hume, and then Mary Lefebvre, you're on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, I'd just like to address jurisdiction.
Who are you?
Oh, sorry. Brett Hume, Southeastern Carpenters Regional Council. Just to address jurisdiction, with Representative Reeves touched on, the power of Congress to exclude aliens from the United States and to prescribe the terms and conditions on which they come in is absolute, being an attribute of the United States as a sovereign nation. That the government of the United States, through the action of the legislative department, can exclude aliens from its territory is a proposition which we do not think open to controversy. Jurisdiction over its own territory to that extent is an incident of every independent nation. Secondly, Congress's power to admit aliens under whatever conditions it lays down is exclusive of state regulation. The states, quote, can neither add to nor take away from the conditions lawfully imposed by Congress upon admission, naturalization, and residence of aliens in the United States or the several states. State laws which impose discriminatory burdens upon the entrance or residence of aliens lawfully within the United States conflict with the constitutionally derived federal power to regulate immigration and have accordingly been held invalid. A petition under the visa piece to import an alien as an H-2A worker may not be approved by the Attorney General unless the petitioner has applied to the Secretary of Labor, again, federal, upon certification that, and it goes into the criteria that was mentioned by the author. I would lastly say that a lot of the language in the bill comes directly out of a study from the Joint Development Authority, which are the 4 counties around the Savannah area that formed to help bring Hyundai to our state. This is also open to abuse because, unfortunately, on short notice, a former worker could not make it here to testify. But I would suggest to you that this will not be limited to small business because Hyundai brought H-2 workers under an engineering visa. These workers were laying pipe, pulling wire, in other words, skilled labor. So another abuse we've seen on the current H-2 visa. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I'm going to say this while there's no lights lit up. Let's hold off on any questions. Let's let these folks speak. Mary LaFavor and then Nick Stanagich, something like that. So Mary, you in here? Maybe this was an old sign-up sheet. Okay, is Fred McCorson here?
I'm Nick Stanagich.
Okay. Yep. Is Fred in here? Okay, that completes that sign-up sheet. All right. Nick, come on up. Who knows? This is interesting labor.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Nicholas Stanoyevich. I'm a labor and employment lawyer here in Georgia with Quinn, Connor, Weaver, Davies, and Rucco. I'm here to talk about a couple of the things that I've seen in this bill that trouble me from a standpoint of adding additional legislation, including legislation that includes criminal penalties for certain behavior, without having carefully thought out the way it is actually going to integrate with existing law. I think the profferers of this bill have noted that it is not meant to go immediately into effect, which is good because it would be unconstitutional as written now under the current state of the law. It is meant to go into effect when the Attorney General determines that it may lawfully go into effect. Now, they've also represented the bill as being limited to simply telling the federal government or allowing the state of Georgia to determine the number of employees needed under a guest worker program. But the text of the bill goes far beyond that and creates what I think is a confusing system, a system that gives us more questions than answers, and that frankly, if this bill is meant to dovetail and work in conjunction with federal immigration law, then it should more clearly reference federal immigration law, which it does not clearly reference at any point in the bill. And it should be designed in such a way that we understand what the legal landscape looks like. You know, we're making a bill to administer a complicated program, envisioning that there might be a change in the law in the future without knowing what that change is. And so therefore we can't really build the text of the bill in a way that actually works with whatever that new legal situation is. And then I'd like to walk through and just address a couple of specific concerns. First, if we look at lines 30 and 32 in the definition section of 3411.3, it defines a guest worker specifically as a citizen of another country allowed to work in this state pursuant to the program established by this chapter. So it's referencing the guest worker program established by this bill. The guest worker program established by this bill is defined as a program created by the governor and administered by a department of the state of Georgia designated by the governor as provided for in this chapter. Neither of those references a federal immigration program. As we've discussed, and as Mr. Hume said before me, the state of Georgia can't issue visas to bring workers into the country. Federal government still has to do that. And so establishing its own guest worker program rather than simply referencing into the existing guest worker programs creates a lot of confusion. And I'll point out some specific ways in which it does. So for example, moving over to line 112. Under this bill, employers are to ensure, quote, that each guest worker employed by such employer under the guest worker program, that's to say the guest worker program created by the state of Georgia, returns to their country of citizenship upon termination of employment or eligibility under the guest worker program. Again, that is specifically saying that if you are no longer eligible under a state program, that the employer has to make an effort to ensure you get returned to whatever your country of origin is. What if you are here pursuant to a valid visa, either a student visa or some other form of valid federal authorization to be in the country? Now, suddenly this bill is creating a requirement that your employer try to get you returned back to your country of origin without actually knowing if you have or have lost the legal right to be here. Similarly, on line, and this is on this similar issue, lines 152 to 157, it provides that it is a crime for any person who participates in the guest worker program as a guest worker to fail or refuse to return to their country of citizenship within 30 days following the termination of his or her employment as a guest worker, or within 30 days of expiration of his or her status as a guest worker. Now, that's guilty of a felony, imprisoned, and fined $10,000, no more than $10,000. So the issue again here is that this is referencing guest workers in the guest worker program, which this bill defines as being those created by the state of Georgia. So are we creating a system where someone could be a felon in Georgia, subject to up to a $10,000 fine for where they, for no longer working for the employer that the state of Georgia arranged for them to work with, while they're still federally authorized to be in the country under whatever terms of the federal visa they're in under? So I think the concerns that I'm raising here and what I'm asking the bill sponsors and the committee to consider is that if we're going, I applaud and support increasing protections for workers in this state, increasing access to health insurance, increasing support through unemployment compensation and all of that. If we're going to do that, and we have the opportunity to do that, we should do it in a way that specifically dovetails effectively with federal law, that takes into account what the realities are so that we're not simply drafting, passing legislation, and then potentially paying to defend it unconstitutionally in court down the line. So I thank you for your time, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you very much. James Williams.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee. I'm James Williams from the Georgia AFL-CIO. This legislation mandates that the employers participating in this program are required to take on innumerable expenses. In the bill, it addresses fees that they have to pay to the state in order to implement this program. I'd like to know what those fees are. There's also an overall cost to this program to the state for even setting it up and implementing it. I'd like to see a fiscal note on that and see what the cost is going to be to me, a Georgia taxpayer, for implementing this program. And there are groups that have already done studies. Brett Hume mentioned a study done by the Savannah Joint Development Authority, and they're looking at a 16,700 worker shortage in that area, along the lines of the Hyundai plant, the battery plant, and the other infrastructure that they got to put in around that. And they have ideas about, and they already are building training academies, schools. They're recruiting military retirees and other folks. Why are we reaching out to a guest worker program when we could actually expand these programs within the state of Georgia and put these jobs in the hands of tax-paying Georgia citizens? There's a lot of gaps in this legislation. It is referenced that they can bring a spouse and immediate family to the country, but that is a completely separate visa program. The worker is under an H-2A. The family would be under an H-4 visa. And so how does that work with the termination of that employer in the 30-day time frame, like Mr. Snoyevich said? Is the worker going to be fined and in jail, but the family's okay because their visa is extended beyond this program? Because this bill only addresses the worker in that situation. Another one is the bill states provide. The only thing that it says at no charge is lines 89 and 90. They will provide the guest worker with no charge, no deposit, all tools, supplies, equipment required to perform the duties assigned. So it does say they have to provide insurance. It doesn't say what type of insurance, what the level of coverage is going to be, and how much that's going to cost the guest worker. It also provides free 3 meals a day or a free kitchen to cook their own meals, and that is only for the worker. If they're bringing in H-4 visas as their family members, how's the family going to get fed under this bill? There's no regulations or controls on that. And it also doesn't determine what the quality of the food is. You see a lot of language in the bill that the governor will determine, like when we get into housing, the governor will determine what quality housing is in the state of Georgia. I'd like to see where the governor's going to reference that from. Is it, is the electrical work going to have to be up to the National Electric Code? Is everything installed in that housing going to have to be UL listed? Things of that nature aren't really addressed in this bill. And so there's just, with this bill, and organized labor is not against migrant workers. We're not against anyone, but we want to make sure that those workers and their working families, when they come to the United States, are protected and treated well. Representative McClain mentioned that, what are you going to do if we make them work 18-hour days? Under the FSLA, all it says is they got to pay them overtime after 40. And it doesn't say that they cannot work them 18 to 20-hour days. And if the company is providing your housing, your insurance, your food, your transportation to that job, and the job itself, it gives them a lot of control over the conditions at that plant and that facility. So I just, there's a lot of language in this bill provided for the workers, but zero language on quality and controls and metrics of that nature in this bill. So I'd like to see those addressed. There is no language in this bill on the cost to the taxpayers of the state of Georgia as far as implementing this agency. And now we hear language about bringing in multiple different agencies like the Department of Labor, Department of Economic Development into this bill. How much is that going to cost the Georgia taxpayers to set it up for a bill that we can't really implement unless the federal government changes its laws? So if the federal government doesn't change anything, how much is it going to cost us to just set up even the program for this bill? So thank you much for your time, and thank you for taking my concerns.
Okay, thank you. Hannah Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Hannah Perkins. I'm with the Georgia AFL-CIO, and I wanted to speak today specifically on sections 3411-4A and section 3411-7A. Section 3411A outlines which workers cannot qualify for the guest worker program, such as if they have been convicted of a felony or have previously been refused entry to the United States. However, there is no similar background check on employers and whether or not they have previous labor rights violations. If the state of Georgia were to start a guest worker program, we should make sure that the participating employers do not have a consistent pattern of behavior in violating workers' rights and undermining workers. Without this, any employer, regardless of how they've previously treated workers, could benefit from this program where they would have nearly complete economic and social control over their workforce. In that same vein, section 3411-7A includes punitive measures for companies who violate or do not provide the poorly defined aspects of the guest worker program. However, there is no language regarding how potential violations will be tracked or monitored. Setting a standard and actively monitoring a situation where conditions could quickly go south are two very different things. And so how would the state of Georgia ensure that employers in this program are providing what would be required by law, the housing, health care, 3 meals a day? We will be creating, a department or a team to oversee this in the designated agency, and where will quality of life factor in? This legislation will give companies participating in this program almost complete carte blanche on how they treat workers by providing no background checks on previous labor violations and setting up a system with no oversight and poorly defined responsibilities. Companies will be free to completely control their workforce and their families. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Seth Spann.
How y'all doing? Y'all forgive my disheveled look. You know, my weatherman told me it was going to be sunny today, so I got a little messed up coming in here today. I think that...
Who are you?
My name is Seth Spann. I am the political director for United Food and Commercial Workers. A lot of points today have been touched very well. My opinion of this bill is I think that at its heart, it has the right intentions. I think, though, that it's raised more questions, more concerns. It's the scope of it is really vague, so the questions just keep coming. I do want to say, though, in my brief time here, that we need to address concerns of labor shortages and answer the questions of why those shortages are there. Okay? Is it because of worker treatment? Is it because of pay? Is it because of benefit structure? What is causing these folks to not go to those jobs? So I would welcome conversations from any of you on this committee so that we can look at some of those reasons. I think I'm specifically astute to answer and talk about this because a lot of my membership base are in those chicken plants, are in those folks that we have to have minority and immigrant workers, right? So I'd welcome y'all to talk to me about that, and maybe we can look at some solutions so that those folks that are here legally in the state of Georgia, as well as the citizenry of Georgia, can have protections and we can improve their labor standards. Thanks.
Okay, Mike Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee. My name's Mike Tharp with Communication Workers of America, and state lawmakers in Georgia have fought hard to be sure that they've brought good new industries and jobs to Georgia. And Georgians were promised good jobs and good jobs for these new opportunities. So HB 82 would cut corners, turning permanent jobs into temporary jobs, recruiting foreign workers to fill those positions. And that doesn't sound like good jobs for Georgians. And we need to address the current labor shortages in our state. But focus should be on how to attract Georgians to these new jobs and industries here, not how to undercut their economic opportunities. Georgia worker programs also transform the fundamental nature of our communities. Workers who are imported into Georgia only for their labor and only temporarily have no incentive to invest in their communities. Guest worker programs essentially create second-class citizens who remain marginalized with no voice at work or in our democracy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
All right, Tony Tillery.
At this point, may be redundant, so thanks, sir.
You're my hero. All right, that exhausts. Are you sure you want to ask a question?
I want to ask the author just one question.
Better do it in few words as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the question I want to ask, can we set up our own worker program?
Absolutely. And you know, this bill's been on file since March in the 2024 and this current one, and I haven't heard from a single one of these labor organizations in those 11 or 12 months on these marginal arguments. Everything that I've heard today can be handled in an hour or two of revisions if they're done in good faith. But absolutely, South Carolina has gotten the feds to send them more workers. Other states have. But absolutely, Georgia can exercise leadership and set up an infrastructure so that our unmet workforce needs that are not met by Georgia, national, or the status quo in the federal government, so that Georgia can ask the feds to send us more. We're not going to get any more than we ask for from the federal government on immigration. This is the way to get our needs met, to set up this infrastructure and exercise leadership in this important area. The arguments that have been made today can be handled through cleaning this bill up, and I'm glad to continue to work on this. I think it's something that's needed. It will be beneficial. And all these folks who have workers in Georgia, when one of these employers contacts the state and says we have unmet needs, they can get the word out to their workers. This bill will not hurt Georgia workers at all. It's to meet unmet workforce needs with legal, merit-based temporary immigration.
Mike Gals, come on up. I'm sorry, Miss Sign Up Sheet. I didn't want to say this because I was met with this in judiciary non-civil. I'm going to defend the author on this because I got, I guess, railroaded by folks that I have an open door policy, and just like the author was willing to make changes, but you can't make them when you're not having conversations. So if you've got a problem with the bill, and we tell our members this in our caucus, and if you got a problem with the bill, he is real easy to find. So, Mike Giles, tell us who you are.
Mike Giles, I'm president of Georgia Poultry Federation. Thank you. I did miss the sign up, but wanted to make very brief comments. We believe, we appreciate the author for bringing this bill forward for the discussion. We believe if enacted, House Bill 82 would set the stage for the state of Georgia to complement and facilitate guest worker programs as authorized by the federal government. One of the features, I think the main feature of this bill, is one that we have actually argued for over 20 years when entering the discussion of comprehensive immigration reform at the federal level. and that is to create a mechanism whereby industry business sectors could ask for and demonstrate the circumstances when the domestic workforce isn't meeting the needs of the employer. And so having that as a feature of this bill, I think, is really the most important, and is one of the things that we have argued for at the federal level for many years. That's really the main thing I want to say. We'd love to continue to be part of this discussion, and again, we thank the author for bringing the bill forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That concludes all the lights, and I'm going to end this before I get any lit up. So we're adjourned. Thank y'all.